Hi, I'm Natasha Ryan with Premier Risk Solutions, and this is our video series, Strong, Safe, and True, where we sit down with leaders in the security sector to talk about everything going on. And I really am super interested in our topic today. We're talking about the safety or maybe lack thereof with major venues around sporting events in the country. So of course, I have a man who knows all about that. James DeMeo joining me. James, thank you so much. And tell us why and how you know so much about sports venues.
Well, Natasha, thank you for the opportunity to have a timely discussion. James DeMeo, specializing in sports security. We're coming out of the worst pandemic in 100 years. As fans transition into stadiums, venues, and arenas, sport venue risk managers are looking at a multitude of ways to safeguard confined spaces. So we're seeing obviously, challenges with labor shortages, supply chain, obviously domestic extremism. We're seeing a multitude of pandemic challenges, cyber related challenges for confined spaces. So collectively as an industry, how can we look at the space to make sure that fans are, number one, being entertained, right? That's what sports and entertainment is all about, is an amazing fan experience. But we have to balance that experience with obviously safety and security initiatives.
Okay, so general overview, where do you see the gaps? Like where are these venues and stadiums most vulnerable? And are we talking about what is the most vulnerable? Like football stadiums, professional level, college level? Like what's your take on all of this?
Well, it's a great question. And certainly, again, as I mentioned, as we transition, I would really recommend that a lot of the venues kind of revisit risk assessments, bringing in, obviously security experts, folks that are well versed in kind of looking at that space to see where those, as you mentioned, those threats, gaps, and vulnerabilities are. So it could be, a $1 billion building like the Barclays Center, which I helped open in 2012 with AEG, which was a great experience. It could be a mid-sized venue. It could be K through 12 high school football in the state of Texas, which I experienced. So it's a multitude of spaces. And again, when we look at these challenges, A through Z, active shooter, black swan, aerial assault, obviously inclement severe weather conditions, insider threat, active shooter, as I've mentioned, and certainly pandemic planning, and how fans are kind of adapting to COVID measures within confined spaces, whether or not fans want to wear masks or, what are the policies of obviously that state, the governor, that flows down to the venue, depending on, how security is going to deal with those challenges if they're dealing with disgruntled fans within confined spaces.
Let me ask you this. So since the primary spotlight right now is on COVID and safety around COVID, do you think that stadiums and venues have gotten a little too lax on the other front, like active shooter scenarios or like bomb threats or whatever, the security risk is? Do you think all the focus has shifted to COVID lately, or are they still making a good balance?
They're doing the very best they can with the resources that they have. But, and I always say nobody bats 1,000 in the security industry. So,
Sure.
So ultimately, we want to just make sure that that the folks that are reaching out to them, that their intentions are good, that they're trying to create value for the ownership groups. But the ownership groups have to realize too that it's virtually impossible for them to safeguard those spaces without those effective relationships between, obviously law enforcement, contract security, as well as security experts that understand, how to assess risks, whether it's low, medium, or kind of a high risk scenario, but making sure that you have skilled experts that can see the space, obviously subjectively, and not to criticize, but to create value and to offer them solutions, the things that keep them up at night, things that concern them, to create kind of a collaborative in terms of making the fans safe, but again making sure, or at least ensuring, that we're doing everything possible to safeguard these spaces with the resources available.
So you keep talking about available resources, and obviously, like across the board, we're seeing a shortage in labor, right? So no one has the resources that they potentially want or need. Do you see that affecting the venues in a obviously in a negative way? I mean, are these venues safe enough right now, or is that shortage of labor affecting everyone to where you wouldn't go watch a game?
Sure. So I try to be more positive than negative. I would substitute the word challenges. They have
Okay.
challenges. And so when you have, let's say, for instance, here in Raleigh, we have the state fair, which is well attended. In years past, we had maybe 5 different law enforcement agencies, but because of shortages in law enforcement, we're pulling from 19 separate agencies to safeguard the state fair. Now, nothing against law enforcement because I spent 21 years in the profession, but when you show up at the venue, if you're working with officers from different jurisdictions that have never trained together, yes, they're trained in active shooter, but they don't know who's running the event, or they may not be familiar with obviously different agencies in regards to like a larger event. So I would say that certainly challenging. If you're bussing in guest services and security staffers, part-timers that are maybe 2 or 3 hours away from the venue because you're trying to pull resources
Yeah.
from neighboring cities and states, those staffers are showing up tired before they even get to the venue. Now they're asked to, man or, safeguard a particular post. And it becomes one of these things where it's just, human error and fatigue set in. And so if we don't have that consistency again, because maybe the salaries aren't where they should be, and there's a higher turnover, again, you lack that consistency in terms of best safeguarding that particular space.
I mean, that's a great point that people don't think about. You're asking folks that live hours away to come keep people safe, and they're already tired because they're already working a day job, and then they're coming over in their extra time potentially to help out. And I mean, that's a crazy thought. So, given these circumstances or challenges, would you say that stadiums and venues are 10% less safe, 20% less safe? I'm just trying to ballpark it in my mind.
Again, it's very hard to kind of quantify a certain percentage because it's
Right.
really not fair, in
Yeah.
terms of the ownership that's,
Let me reword this. Is it a concern for spectators? Should they be concerned about the state of employees that are safeguarding them?
well, I think, an educated fan is a safe fan, Natasha. So, we're all in this together. So when the
Yeah.
fans take the time to review the websites, they know exactly, whether or not the venue has a clear bag policy, whether or not, you must wear a mask, let's say, at an inside symphony, indoor symphony. An educated fan is a safe fan. So it's really a collaborative effort, the fans knowing, what's expected of them. And certainly, from the inside, we're seeing a lot of fan brawls now in
Yeah.
professional sports. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, um, individuals that are overserved with alcohol. So we have to kind of monitor the sport marketing side in terms of, bringing in revenues, but also that duty of care where we can institute effective alcohol beverage control programs. Let's say at the end of the second period in an NHL hockey game or the fourth inning in Major League Baseball, we need to kind of monitor, when we're serving. Hopefully, we're not over serving, but understanding that security, guest services, law enforcement need to be on the lookout for those potential, volatile points, in the concourse areas. That if there is some kind of a fight situation, next thing you know, it goes viral. It's all over social
Oh,
media.
yeah. Yeah.
To your point about, wow, I just saw something at a Dodgers game and I don't feel safe bringing my family, to that venue because there was a brawl there, last week as an example. So I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things where the branding comes in. It's also important inside the command centers, that they're utilizing all the tools that they have at their disposal, CC television, biometrics, iris scans, license plate reader technologies on exterior perimeters. These are all tools that are designed to keep fans safe. But again, multitude of challenges. I'm concerned. Again, I'm not a fear monger. I'm someone who talks about education, looking
Yeah.
at things holistically, and making sure that everybody speaks the same language in the interest of public safety.
So you're immersed in this world. So how's the compliance going with the mask wearing during the games and events? How's that going?
It depends on who you talk to. It depends on what state you're in. Florida may do it a little bit differently than North Carolina as
Yeah.
opposed to California. So I think, again, it's kind of, we're dealing with the Delta variant, more people are getting vaccinated, but we're also getting the challenges of whether or not, ownership groups are mandating that employees are going to be vaccinated and whether or not that causes any type of, conflict. So it's really about training, educating, making sure that we're looking at the space, obviously, to see what kind of challenges. But, I always talk about just getting out in front. And so when you're proactive, you operate from a position of strength and not weakness.
So if you're in a situation where you can't seem to pull the amount of, the security professionals that you need, are you seeing venues just say, well, we're not going to have as many, or are they decreasing the number of fans? Like, how are they compensating?
Well, again, another great question, and the performer too has a say, he or she, right, in terms of
Right,
their own safety, because in
right.
a sense, it's their work environment, right? So we talk about duty of care and workplace violence. So I
Sure.
think it's just making sure everybody's comfortable, and that if the venue makes a commitment to provide X amount of security officers, they have to fulfill that commitment, and so they don't want to leave themselves in a position where they're promising something and not delivering, because then if there is an adverse situation, they're going to have to explain
Yeah,
potentially in court if they face litigation
right.
in terms of any type of bad situation.
All right, so if you had to sum up your number one concern at this moment for sports venues challenge, what would that be?
I would say first and foremost is it's a great question. It goes across multiple verticals. We're seeing it on planes. We're seeing it in sport venues. We've been cooped up for nearly 2 years. So we have, just this pandemic fatigue. We also have untreated mental health. And a lot of these scenarios spill over into confined spaces. People are bottled up. They have a lot of frustration. They go out, they start drinking, and they start taking their frustrations out on people around them.
Mhm.
It's a societal issue that we need to look at holistically. And again, it's to really just see where the weaknesses are, learn from our lessons. If something bad happens with the Dodgers, if I'm the security manager, then I'm on the phone with the Padres or the Giants or wherever that team was where we had a bad situation. And I'm sharing, hey, listen, this went wrong in section 101 or this went right. But it's important that those leaders communicate with each other, to tell stories, to share what was effective and what wasn't, because again, collaboratively, the industry really gets, obviously a bad rap if they're not doing everything possible to safeguard the fans.
Okay, James, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate your time. And I appreciate all of you for watching this video, and can come back to premierrisksolutions.com for more videos just like this one. James DeMeo, thank you.
Thank you so much.